who was the coordinator for implementing the Iranian nuclear deal. And on the line now is Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, who is head of the American Studies Department at Tehran University. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you believe the effect would be of President Trump refusing to sign the deal the next time around?
Well, I think it probably hurts the United States government more than it would hurt Iran, because the United States will be seen by the international community, especially the rising powers of Asia, as not being able to abide by its own commitments, whereas Iran has been abiding by its commitments from day one. And we have to keep in mind that the Iranians made many concessions, and many people in Iran were opposed to the deal. They felt that the government gave too many concessions. But in Iran, there was a consensus that despite the disagreements, once a decision has been made, the country must abide by it. And I think that the United States, unfortunately, after the agreement, under Obama, they repeatedly...
Oh, I'm afraid it sounds as though we have... Oh, you are there. I'm sorry, we're losing you. I don't know whether this is a terminal problem with the line or whether we... Can you hear me now, Professor Marandi?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Right, if you could just finish the point you were making there.
Yes, I was saying that the United States, under Obama, they were violating the agreement almost from day one. The sanctions on the visa restriction laws, the Iran Sanctions Act, the Treasury Department that was forcing banks and insurance companies not to work with Iran. All of these were in violation of Articles 26 to 29. So I think the international community outside of much of the Western, outside of Europe and North America, they're beginning to recognize that Iran has been the victim in all this.
Will Iran, do you think, resume its nuclear program if the deal comes to an end?
Well, one interesting thing that your previous guest admitted, and if your listeners follow the Iranian foreign minister, Dr. Zarif, on Twitter, he raised this just a while back. Pompeo, the head of the CIA, who's going to be the head of the foreign secretary, the State Department chief, he admitted that before the agreement, Iran was not actively pursuing a nuclear weapon. And this runs against the propaganda that we were hearing for over a decade in the media in the West, in think tanks and among governments. Even Obama said specifically that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. So now it's becoming clear that this was dishonest all along.
All right.
And they were using the nuclear program as an excuse to harm Iran. But yes, I think that if the Americans exit the agreement, then the Iranians will go back to business as usual, and they will reactivate their nuclear program.
Back to business as usual. And for many, what Iran does and calls it, or at least they would regard as business as usual, is supporting what they would call terrorism and Iran's determination to wipe Israel off the map, which is a huge threat to peace in the Middle East, indeed, world peace in many respects.
Well, first you said we, and then you said they. I don't know if that's your own opinion.
I'm talking about that the powers that be here fear, in this part of the world, fear what Iran might do.
No, I don't think they really fear that, because their intelligence organizations know better. That's the propaganda. The Iranians have never, despite the misinformation propaganda, they've never threatened to initiate conflict with the Israeli regime.
But they do so almost every day. I mean, as we speak.
No, they don't. What the Iranians are doing in Syria is helping clean up the mess that Western countries helped create. Western countries, according to the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency document of 2012, which was this is an organization in the Pentagon with 20,000 people working in it. That document pointed out that countries surrounding Syria were supporting the extremists in 2012, and early on in the situation in Syria, the extremists had the upper hand, according to that document. And the head of that organization at the time, the famous General Flynn, admitted on Al Jazeera that the United States took a willful decision to support those countries in supporting the extremists. So what Iran is doing is that they've helped prevent ISIS and Al Qaeda from taking over the country. The same Al-Qaeda, by the way, headed up 7/7 in London.
Indeed. And when you talk about Iran supporting the extremists, or Iran trying to defeat the extremists, where does Hezbollah come into this equation? Because Hezbollah could not obviously exist without Iranian support. Hezbollah is determined, as I say, to wipe Israel off the map.
That's not accurate. The Hezbollah does not believe nor does Iran believe in the legitimacy of Israel because it's an apartheid regime.
Indeed.
So when they say it should not exist, it's the same position that they had towards South Africa, apartheid South Africa, that it must cease to exist as an apartheid state.
Yeah, the difference with South Africa was that you weren't able to do anything about South Africa. You can do a great deal about Israel, and indeed you are trying to do exactly that.
That's not true. Hezbollah has never initiated conflict with Israel. Hezbollah is a national liberation organization that pushed Israel out of occupying half of Lebanon. They liberated their country. And right now, the Hezbollah has not actively attacked Israel. On the other hand, just a few days ago, Israel attacked and killed 7 Iranian soldiers. Iranians have never attacked Israelis inside Israel, but the Israelis do that. Yet Iran is accused of threatening Israel, whereas the Israeli regime repeatedly threatens Iran with military strikes. And as we speak, the Israelis constantly threaten Lebanon with total destruction. They say the next war we will demolish the whole country. Yet somehow Hezbollah, they're the bad guys, they're the terrorists. Their country was, and the Israelis who subjugate the Palestinians, they're the good guys.
Have to end it there, I'm afraid. Thanks very much indeed, Professor Marandi. Jeremy Bowen.